Committee will come to order. We'll start with opening statements like we do, swear the witness in, and then get right to testimony and questions. Today's hearing continues the committee's important work examining the Export-Import Bank. Just 19 days, the bank's charter is set to expire. When this happens, the sky will not fall, seas will not rise. In fact, in my view, and the view of many economists, quite the opposite will happen. The expiration of the bank's charter will mean that companies doing business overseas will reorient themselves away from Washington and towards market signals. The bank's absence will make our economy stronger. Besides the economic rationale, there are also serious problems with the manner in which the bank has operated that make its continued existence untenable. In just the past couple of months, one former Export-Import Bank loan officer was indicted and pled guilty for accepting over $78,000 in bribes. And we learned that the Inspector General's office, that we have with us today, has dozens of other investigations open that may yield more indictments. Over its history, the bank has been plagued by scandal and systemic corruption. Many people forget that the $90,000 in cash found in former Representative William Jefferson's freezer related directly to a bribe taken to help a company secure financing from the Export-Import Bank. Recently, another scandal has emerged. Newsat, an Australian satellite company that received over $300 million in direct loans from Ex-Im, defaulted on its payments and declared bankruptcy. It is now clear that there were significant problems at Newsat. Had the bank done proper due diligence, it almost certainly would have been aware of these issues before putting taxpayer dollars at risk. Even more troubling is that Newsat's disgraced CEO appears to have had a cozy relationship with Ex-Im Chairman Hochberg. These kinds of revelations have become all too common at the Export-Import Bank, and it's another reason that I'm glad it appears my colleagues will finally let the bank expire. This is a no-brainer for Congress. Like ending earmarks after the bridge to nowhere, two problems at the bank are so awful that they should be a wake-up call not just about Ex-Im, but about the problems with corporate welfare across the Federal Government. At the end of June, the bank will not fire all of its employees. It will not lock its doors, won't board up its windows. The bank will be allowed to continue servicing existing loans and go through an orderly wind-down. The stories of calamity are overstated, and no one outside of the few major corporations benefiting from its finance will even notice. Many will make a push to revive the bank after its charter lapses. But much like Dr. Frankenstein and his monster, the world would be much better off letting the bank remain dead after it expires at the end of the month. It's now time to show the bank the door. The chairman of all the relevant committees, Chairman Ryan at Ways and Means, Chairman Chaffetz at Oversight, Chairman Price at Budget, and Chairman Hensarling at Financial Services, support ending the bank. Majority Leader McCarthy, Majority Whip Scalise have both expressed opposition publicly. And as I mentioned at our last hearing, the best part about this is that all we need to do is nothing, something the American people think Congress is pretty darn good at. With that, I yield to the ranking member, gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witness this afternoon. I look forward to your testimony. Here we are again for another hearing on the Export-Import Bank, this time to examine the bank's efforts in dealing with waste, fraud, and abuse. There are, as the chairman mentioned, 9 legislative days left until the bank's charter expires. This is 9 legislative days before the country stands to start to lose the billions of dollars of exports that Ex-Im Bank is responsible for, 9 legislative days before we start to jeopardize the hundreds of thousands of American jobs that the work of this bank supports, 9 legislative days before the shutdown crowd gets their way and closes an institution with a default rate of only 0.0167% as of this March, an institution that returns money to the United States Treasury. This is something taxpayers ought to cheer and applaud and be proud of, not shut down. When I look at the bank, I see a patriotic institution, an institution that supports American-made products and American jobs, the kind of things that we ought to be proud of. You know, earlier this week, I had the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Bill Weller. Bill Weller is the Vice President of Marketing and Sales of Space Systems Loral, also known as SSL. SSL is a world leader in commercial GEO satellites and they have more communications capacity in orbit than any other manufacturer in the world. We ought to be proud of SSL. They employed approximately 2,800 people domestically, building satellites for companies such as Dish Network and DirecTV. SSL has customers in 15 countries, and their exports account for 60% of their sales. But SSL faces stiff competition from manufacturers in France, China, Israel, and Japan. Companies in those countries compete with SSL using attractive government financing terms. And to simply help level the playing field, SSL works with the Ex-Im Bank to obtain crucial financing and guarantees. Without the bank's financing, SSL would lose contracts to our foreign competitors and be forced to cut their workforce. It's not just SSL, remember, that benefits. It's the over 1,600 U.S. suppliers in 47 states that benefit from it. Given all of this, I ask, when are we going to start to be proud of the efforts and the work of the Ex-Im Bank? Many of my friends on the other side of the aisle contend that the bank is rife with fraud and corruption. And in his semi-annual report to Congress, Deputy Inspector General Mike McCarthy identified 31 cases of fraud, waste, or abuse that his office was investigating. And Mr. McCarthy, I think you'll reaffirm that only 3 of those involve allegations of employee misconduct. To quote Fred Hochberg, Chairman and President of the bank, who testified repeatedly before this committee and testified before the Financial Services Committee on June 3rd, quote, "There will always be outsiders who attempt to defraud the government," unquote. How agencies respond to those attempts is what we should be focusing on. The bank has responded quite well. In addition, it's clear from the Deputy IG's report that the bank has fully cooperated with the IG's office in rooting out cases of employee and outside misconduct and is dealing with these individuals appropriately. The report also cites a number of instances of investigative successes. Moreover, there has been only 1 indictment of a bank employee. The other incidents were dealt with by administrative action or found to be groundless. It's exactly how the system ought to work. Now, there are always instances of waste, fraud, and abuse in government. In fact, the United States Army is rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. So are all of our armed services, and they always have been. But that's not a reason to shut them down. We're proud of our Army. We're proud of our Navy, and we'll continue to combat waste, fraud, and abuse. That will always be there, but they're not reasons to shut down the operation. We have 9 legislative days to renew the bank's charter, and we shouldn't be wasting this time playing political and ideological games. I hope today's hearing will highlight the good work the bank does in assisting businesses, will resolve any questions concerning the IG's report, and provide additional support for this bank's continuing reauthorization. It's time, at long last, Mr. Chairman, that we are proud of American exports and the help the Ex-Im Bank assists in those exports. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We'll hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any member or members who would like to submit a written statement. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. We now turn to our witness again, Mr. McCarthy. Thank you. This is the second time, I think, in front of from the Oversight Committee on this issue. You've been here. We appreciate you coming back. So I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Michael McCarthy, who is currently Acting Inspector General of the Export-Import Bank of the United States. And you know how this works, Mr. McCarthy. You have 5 minutes for your testimony, and we look forward to that, and then we'll get right to questions. Gentleman's record. Oh, we got to swear you in. Yeah, we always do that. So please stand and raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect that the gentleman answered in the affirmative. You got 5 minutes, Mr. McCarthy, and you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Cartwright, and members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be back here to discuss the work of the Ex-Im Bank Office of Inspector General. The committee already has my written testimony, which highlights the work that our professional auditors, inspectors, and special agents have done to promote efficiency and detect and deter fraud at Ex-Im Bank. The committee has asked me to discuss instances of fraud, waste, and abuse at the bank and steps taken to address deficiencies in management and internal controls. So let me briefly cover a few highlights. Since 2009, OIG investigations into fraud schemes that target Ex-Im Bank have yielded 84 criminal indictments and informations, 50 convictions, and $255 million in judgments and repayments. The most common fraud schemes that we have encountered involve outside parties obtaining loans or guarantees through false representations and submissions of false documents. We work closely with the bank's Asset Management Division, which makes referrals of transactions or claims with indicators of fraud. We currently have 29 open investigations, and nearly all of them address persons committing fraud against the bank and have no indications of Ex-Im employee involvement. However, as the Chair and Ranking Member noted, one of those fraud cases involves former Ex-Im loan officer Johnny Gutierrez, who pleaded guilty to 1 count of bribery of a public official. Mr. Gutierrez admitted accepting more than $78,000 in bribes in return for recommending the approval of unqualified loan applications to the bank, among other misconduct. This case remains an active fraud investigation as to other parties. We have closed other employee integrity cases in the past year that led to findings of misconduct and personnel being separated from employment at the bank, but no criminal charges. As I have previously testified, our open investigations are at various stages, and working with the Department of Justice, some of those cases may result in more prosecutions for bank fraud and money laundering. At this time, I would not expect charges against any Ex-Im Bank employees from our current caseload. As to our recommendations from audits and inspections, we have 48 open and unresolved recommendations, 24 from the current fiscal year and 24 from prior fiscal years. The written testimony summarizes recent audit work on internal controls. Our independent audit of the bank's financial statements found that they were fairly presented in all material respects and had no material weaknesses. Our audits also found substantial compliance with the cybersecurity requirements of FISMA, and that internal controls for the short-term multi-buyer insurance program provided reasonable assurance of compliance. A recent annual audit found noncompliance with the Improper Payments Act, and we recommended changes to the risk assessment process, which the bank is implementing. And a required risk assessment of the purchase card and travel card programs at the bank found them to be low risk. Every year, we review our work and identify the top management challenges facing the bank. Last fall, the OIG reported that the top challenge was managing risk, specifically managing the bank's core business activities to reduce the risk of loss to the Treasury and, by extension, the taxpayer. To manage that risk, we have recommended the bank design an agency-wide risk management framework so that, in addition to rating the risk of any individual transaction, the bank is also evaluating and mitigating the risks generated by the overall composition of the portfolio and any outsized exposures the bank has in certain regions, industry sectors, or single companies. To accomplish this, we have recommended a Chief Risk Officer, which the bank has established. The bank has also conducted stress testing and monitoring of exposure levels. We hope the bank will build on these steps by developing and implementing key risk policies covering both credit and non-credit risks. We have also recommended improvements to due diligence and know your customer policies, and the bank has deployed improvements in those areas. Finally, we have previously reported that internal policies providing clear guidance to staff had not been prevalent at Ex-Im Bank, so we recommended that the bank rely more on clear policies, controls, and documentation, and less on institutional knowledge. Many of our recommendations have been for specific internal control policies, which the bank is working on implementing. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'm happy to answer the members' questions.
I thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. McCarthy, for coming back again. I want to focus on, move away a little bit from the waste, fraud, and abuse part of the hearing and more on the deficiencies in management, if any, some of the internal controls. You've been here a couple times before, and I think you've either been on panels or were here when we had discussions regarding the 2012 reauthorization bill. I want to focus for a few minutes on one part of the 2012 reauthorization bill, which required the bank to start taking steps to get out of the long-haul aircraft business. You familiar with those reforms, sir, from the 2012 Act?
I'm familiar with those provisions. Yes.
And let me just ask you, have you had a chance to investigate whether or not steps were being taken in order to bring the bank into compliance with the 2012 law?
So that portion of the 2012 reauthorization, that was a responsibility to assign to the Secretary of the Treasury. So our office within Ex-Im Bank wouldn't necessarily have jurisdiction. So we haven't done specific work in that area.
Does it ever come up?
Not in the work that we've been doing,
Okay, so you've not had a chance to talk to Mr. Hochberg about it.
just to the extent that the same information you've received.
The 2012 reform is essentially, are you familiar, Mr. McCarthy, with the home market rule?
No, I'm not.
It's a gentleman's agreement between the American Export-Import Bank and the European Export Credit Facilities.
Regarding aircraft.
Sorry?
Regarding aircraft.
Regarding aircraft.
Okay.
You are familiar with it then, a little bit?
Yes.
It strikes me that the 2012 reforms are very similar to that, or at least not similar, an extension of that. Right now, there's an agreement, for folks who aren't familiar with it, there's an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, ladies' agreement, between Ex-Im and the European Export Credit Facilities that we won't offer export-import financing to British, French, and German air carriers for airplanes, and the European facilities won't offer it to American carriers. Is that your basic understanding, Mr. McCarthy?
That's my
of the rule?
understanding, yes.
Okay. So I guess my question to you is this. In your work, have you seen any erosion of that home market rule in the last couple of years?
I don't believe that we've looked into that or have seen that in the aircraft sector.
What other sector would there be?
Well, so is the question, is that being expanded to other sectors?
No, my question is, it's still in place. Are you still seeing it respected? I guess what I'm getting at is, have you seen any circumstances where we've used export-import financing to allow British, French, or German air carriers to buy American-made airplanes?
Well, I don't think we've looked at that specifically, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay. And I guess if you would be aware of it if it happened, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah. Any examples, Mr. McCarthy, of British, French, or German airlines, of American airlines receiving European export credit facility assistance in buying Airbus airplanes?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So to the best of your knowledge, there's been no erosion in that home market rule in the last couple of years?
To the best of my knowledge.
Okay. I hope I've got some more questions, Mr. Chairman, but I won't be able to get to them in 2 minutes. I hope maybe we'll stick around. Thank you very much, Mr. McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCarthy, according to your most recent semi-annual report, in addition to trainings and briefings with the Ex-Im Bank, your office also conducted briefings on fraud scenarios and money laundering patterns for private sector banks, ranging from the Royal Bank of Scotland right on down to J.P. Morgan Chase. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
So would you agree with me that fraud is an industry-wide problem in banking, not just one that is unique to the Export-Import Bank of the United States, right?
I would agree with that. The frauds that we see are often when we have transactions that involve the private sector and the Ex-Im Bank, both are being defrauded at the same time.
Okay. In fact, isn't it true that a number of your fraud investigations, it's not just Ex-Im Bank that's defrauded, but it's also commercial banks that are defrauded hand in hand?
Yes, that's correct, especially in these guarantee programs where there's a commercial bank making the loan and Ex-Im guaranteeing. Both will be the targets of the fraud.
Okay. So it would seem then that the only surefire way for any bank, not just the Export-Import Bank, to obtain a 0% fraud rate on any loan would be to stop lending money. Is that it?
Well, the goal is always to minimize fraud. Getting it all the way to zero is a challenge for everybody.
Okay. Well, since I really can't imagine members of our committee wanting to end the banking industry as we know it, I would like briefly to examine with you how successful this bank has been at detecting and decreasing fraud. First, are you familiar with the bank's medium-term program?
Yes.
And could you briefly describe what that is?
Well, in 2009, when the OIG started its law enforcement operations, one of the key areas we focused on was the medium-term program, which had a much higher fraud rate, a much higher loss rate than the bank's other programs. So when we started looking into that, we found a fairly high fraud rate in there, and a lot of our investigations stemmed from that program. And at that point in time, in 2009, I think that program was experiencing somewhere close to $100 million in claims filed every year. We had an audit report that we issued that found deficiencies in internal controls, and we also investigated the fraud cases that resulted from those deficiencies.
Okay. Now, in fiscal year 2009, this program paid out $100 million in fraudulent claims. Is that correct?
It paid $100 million in claims. Not all of them were due to fraud.
Okay. And now, as a result of that number, your offices became very involved in attempting to address the high fraud rates in the medium-term program. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, fast forward to fiscal year 2012. The number of fraudulent claims in the medium-term program had declined to approximately $15 million. Am I correct in that?
I believe that's the number we reported. The number of claims, not all of them. Again, not all of them were due to fraud.
And that number dropped again in fiscal year 2013 down to $9 million. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
All right. And for fiscal year 2014, the number dropped yet again to $6 million. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's correct.
So please feel free to correct my arithmetic, but I believe that with respect to the medium-term program, that's a decrease in the fraud rate of 94% in the past 5 years. Am I correct in that?
It's a decrease in the claims rate in that program.
So based on these numbers, it would seem that anybody who characterizes this bank as one that does not take fraud seriously is simply not paying attention. I also want to address with you individual failings, instances of failures of bank customers to repay their loans. All of those, no matter where they are or no matter how much money they failed to pay back, all of those are included in the default rate. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's correct.
So that any company that defaults, you can talk about how much they defaulted on. That's all already built in and included in the bank's default rate, right?
That's right, in the loss rate that the bank reports.
And am I correct when I say as of March this year, that default rate was 0.0167%?
Yes, that's the default rate that's reported under the methodology that Congress put in place in the 2012 reauthorization.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We got votes on the floor, so we're going to do one more round. The gentleman from Michigan will do 5 minutes, then Mr. McCarthy will have to take a recess, and we'll be back. But it should be a fairly long vote series, so maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and I apologize, but nothing we can do. Mr. Wahlberg is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. McCarthy, for being here. Mr. McCarthy, according to your latest semi-annual report, of the 139 recommendations issued by your office in the past few years, 48, over one-third, remain open or unresolved, if my records are accurate. Some of those open items go back to 2010. Can you tell us why the bank still has not closed these recommendations that you've given?
I can't specifically speak to why the bank hasn't closed all of the recommendations. We've been working with them to try to close out more recommendations, and we've made some progress in the past. In my opening statement, I divided that 48 into recommendations that were issued in the current fiscal year, which are half of them, and recommendations that were issued in prior fiscal years. For the current fiscal year, things take time, policies need to be put in place, et cetera, so there's going to be some lag time. The ones that you identified, ones from 2010 to 2014, we would like to see more progress made on those recommendations.
So it's not good enough, at least with those items, for them to still be working?
Well, on those, we have back and forth on the recommendations at some times. On some of them, they've given us interim steps that they've taken, and we've requested more information. Some of them we think we're closer on resolving, that they've actually taken action on. Others that we're not satisfied that they've implemented those recommendations that they've agreed to implement.
Have any of those open recommendations at least given rise to the potential of increased fraud or abuse?
I think in general our recommendations are designed to improve the internal control environment so that when they're put in place, there will be less risk at the bank.
In the first of our series of hearings with the bank, Mr. Hochberg told the committee that he was completely unaware of reports that nearly $2 million of export-import loans intended to bring electricity to 1,200 communities in Ghana was instead used to buy luxury automobiles for foreign government officials. Are you aware of that transaction?
I'm aware of some of the press reports on that transaction. We did do some work in Ghana that was published in a report. We did not cover that specific transaction in that report, but it's something that we're aware of.
Are you planning on following up and reviewing that transaction?
We're looking into it. We're looking into it, but I don't have additional information at this time. It's something that caught our attention as well, those reports.
So at this point, you can't explain as to why taxpayer funds were used to purchase 38 luxury vehicles, including Lexus SUVs and Chrysler 300s, one of which my wife would enjoy having, because she's told me. I guess the question would: Does this type of abuse warrant aggressive oversight from your office?
It's something that we're aware of and something that we're looking into. Generally, one of the recommendations that we've made across our number of our reports is that the bank should improve monitoring of how funds are being dispersed. And once the transactions are approved and originated and underwritten, that's one step in the process. But then there's another step in the process of once things are in the approval pipeline, there needs to be monitoring of what exactly the funds are being used for.
So it is difficult to monitor the disbursement of the monies and where they go once they are dispersed?
Well, once the funds are dispersed, the bank needs to continue monitoring to make sure that the items that are purchased are appropriate, that's supporting U.S. exports.
But you've given them recommendations on how they can upgrade their ability to monitor?
Yes, we've made some specific recommendations on monitoring, and we've also recommended they increase the resources, the human resources that are assigned to that function. And they have done so. They're adding personnel in that area.
How do they work it now? What tools do they use in monitoring and following up, especially with foreign countries?
Well, there's a number of different tools. There are generally reporting requirements in these transactions, so making sure that those reports are coming in when they're due, reading them, reviewing them, looking for discrepancies, asking for additional documentation. There are also site visits are an important part of monitoring. Sometimes you need to go someplace and look at what's actually going on the ground and talk to people who are there to determine whether the funds are being used.
Any penalties that are available to them with these foreign countries if they're not following the rules and the plans of reporting?
Well, if there are, generally these are covenants in the loan transactions for this type of reporting, and if they're not being met, the bank would have options of either calling the loan in or cutting off further financing, considering that in additional applications.
My time has expired. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We will reconvene upon the conclusion of the last vote. The subcommittee stands in recess.